Hello, this is Todd Luck, and this is a review of Carson of Venus, Warlord of Mars from American Mythology and Dynamite Entertainment. And so I've got my display up of Edgar Rice Burroughs comics from both companies. I've got DJ Thor's and Warlord of Mars from Dynamite, and then I got all the American Mythology stuff up here. And I've got my Trendmasters 1990s Tarzan figures from Barsoom out, and I've got this great display. I was expecting this really big event, and when I got this comic, I was looking at the end of it to see if there was an advertisement for like the next thing from American Mythology, because that's how I find out about the next comic they're putting out from Edgar Rice Burroughs line. And I got a really big surprise when I glanced at that last page and saw the words "The End" at the end of this issue. It's a one shot. And so that was a really big surprise to me. That being said, I'm still going to do my whole thing about like giving you information about both companies and both characters and reading recommendations for both of these characters. So at the end, but right now, since this is a one shot, let's just jump in and see if this one single issue is worth picking up. And we're going to begin with this cover by Mike Kaluta. Now, Mike Kaluta did Carson of Venus adaptions back in the 1970s. The first novel adaptation has actually been reprinted recently by American Mythology. And so it's a very, very appropriate choice for the cover. And I think he does it well as far as his pencils go. Where I would have the issue is with the coloring of all the stuff other than our heroes here. It's just a little dark. I can't quite make out what's going on. It feels like Kaluta probably put in some solid pencils and put in a lot of work. I just can't make it out because everything's so dark. The heroes, though, I love this pose, like them just diving into this bunch of bad guys. It's really nice and really kinetic. And so overall, I think it's a solid cover. I just wish the coloring was done a little different. And for the interior, now, I'm going to say congratulations to this art team. So this art team, I've had some issues with them. They've been doing the Carson of Venus stuff for American Mythology, the news stories that they've been putting out, and I just haven't been satisfied with the art. But I kept saying, like, I feel like there's some decent pencils under there if they just had better finishes, if they just had better coloring. And this issue, I'm happy with the artwork, so congratulations to everyone involved. You finally made me happy with your artwork, so thank you for that. It looks nice. This is a nice looking comic. I don't really have any complaints about the artwork. I mean, it's certainly, you could do the artwork in a million different ways, but I certainly think this, kind of captures, the action and, everything going on in this issue. And just looks nice. It's nice to look at and all that good stuff. Now, the story that they chose, they only have one issue, just one issue. So what they've done, instead of setting it on Mars or Venus, they've set it on a completely different planet. And the premise is really simple. A dude summons some heroes. Carson and John Carter show up. He's like, hey, a princess has been captured and she's in this tower. I need you two guys to fight your way up this tower and rescue the princess. That's it. That's the entire issue, just them fighting their way through this tower and rescuing a princess. And there's a kind of a nice twist at the end with the princess, but I'm not going to spoil anything. But it's good, though. I mean, it's simple, but it's well executed. And there's honestly nothing wrong with just a straight action story that's done well. If it's rendered well, if the storytelling's good, there's nothing wrong with two guys just shooting their way through a freaking tower to save someone. I'm down with that. Obviously, if they had more time, they could have done a lot more. Obviously, Mars and Venus have very extensive array of monsters and villains and characters and places. But for one issue, it's fine. I'm not going to like lament over what I think should have been or could have been or whatever. I'm just looking at what is, and what is perfectly fine to me. So I absolutely recommend picking up this issue. I think it's just a solid package from cover to cover, and just an enjoyable time, $4 well spent. And one intriguing thing I do want to point out, the heroes are summoned through 5 doors. Only 2 heroes come out, John Carter and Carson. So who were the other 3 heroes, or what worlds were they going to come from? And so that's a really intriguing kind of tease for something that could happen later. So I don't know if this is perhaps a setup for a bigger project, maybe another miniseries, or maybe a follow-up between Carson and John Carter, or maybe a crossover with all the American mythology stuff and John Carter. I don't know. It's definitely intriguing. I'm hoping there is a follow-up. So, with that being said, let's take a look at who is teaming up here. So, as far as the companies go, if you read comics, you're probably familiar with Dynamite. They do a lot of licensed stuff. They do a lot of public domain stuff. Their Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff started out as an attempt to do some public domain sort of comics with the Burroughs properties, starting with Warlord of Mars. They got sued by the Burroughs estate, and now that stuff's official. So they've done Warlord of Mars, and then they've also done several series of Dija Thorez, Princess of Mars. And so they've been pretty good. Everything's got its gives and takes. Some of the comics are better than others, but I've been digging them. Now, at the current moment, neither Warlord of Mars or Dija Thorez have a regular series, but what they have been doing is doing crossovers like Vampirella meets Dija Thorez, Dija Thorez and Barbarella, and there is an upcoming Warlord of Mars Attacks, and it's Warlord of Mars meets Mars Attacks, and it's written by the amazing Jeff Parker, so I'm definitely checking that out. That could be really, really good. The other company involved is called American Mythology, and so chances are you may not have heard of them even if you read comics. They're a very small company, but they also do licensed comics, and their biggest one is probably Zorro. But they also have rights to do other Edgar Rice Burroughs properties other than Warlord of Mars and Tarzan. And so that is The Land That Time Forgot, and Pellucidar at the Earth's Core. And of course, Carson of Venus. Here is the 2-issue reprint miniseries of Mike Kaluta's adaptation. And then here is the 3-issue original series that they did, Carson of Venus, The Flames Beyond, and that wrapped up recently. Currently, they are putting out Moon Maid, Catacombs of the Moon, and that's probably a 3-issue miniseries. They tend to do 3-issue miniseries, but so that's out right now, and that's, based off Moon Maid and the Moon Men trilogy. And then later this month, there is going to be a Princess of Venus one-shot, and that's going to be Princess Duari, who is Carson of Venus's love interest, and she's going to have her own one-shot. And it's actually previewed in the back of Carson of Venus, John Carter. Looks pretty solid. We'll see how it is once it comes out, and like I said, I'll be reviewing it at the end of the month. And as far as the 2 characters who met in that one-shot go, you have John Carter, who is a 19th century gentleman and soldier from Virginia, who by mysterious means is transported to Mars, and he falls in love with this princess named Dija Thorez, who he eventually saves after a series of adventures. And along the way, he meets and befriends each of the Martian races and kind of brings everyone together. And for that, they name him Warlord of Mars. And so Mars is kind of a barren planet. The oceans have dried up, and so their ships actually sail on the air. And the air that they breathe is actually artificially generated as well. So it's kind of a dying planet, but there's lots of civilizations left on it, but they're always kind of at war with each other. And so John Carter has no shortage of adventures. And of course, in the novels, other heroes also have adventures and star in other novels that come after the first three. As far as the comics go, I recommend picking up the Dynamite, give it a try. Not everything is going to be golden there, but more often than not, I really enjoy the stuff that comes out of Dynamite. And honestly, the John Carter movie is phenomenal. If you've never seen it before, do yourself a favor and watch it. It is amazing. And then there's Carson of Venus, and he's a lesser known character because there just hasn't been a lot done with him outside of the novels. And so he is a rich guy from California, and he's kind of an overachiever, and he decides to build a rocket and go to Mars just for fun. But there's kind of a miscalculation, and he ends up crash landing on Venus instead. And so he has a series of adventures, and it's very similar to Mars in the sense that, you know, everyone walks around scantily clad with a sword and all this stuff, and there are monsters and all that good stuff. But Venus is a very lush planet. It has a lot of exotic forests and oceans and all that good stuff. And he falls in love with a princess named Dewari. But, you know, I think the difference, at least in the tales that I've experienced of Carson of Venus, who I'm less familiar with, but he tends to be out and about in the world of Venus when he's having his adventures. He tends to be kind of wandering around, while John Carter or the other Martian heroes, they tend to start in a palace. You know, they tend to be, you know, part of civilization and, you know, in a Martian city, and then someone gets kidnapped or something. You know, Carson's just kind of wandering around and runs into bad stuff. And so there's a lot of crazy cross-company crossovers nowadays, but this one is actually very in keeping with the Burroughs novels. Burroughs, decades before superheroes even existed, was already doing a shared universe of his own heroes. His novels would make reference to people and places in other novels, and so he even did a crossover with Tarzan at the Earth's core, which was a crossover between Tarzan of the Apes and Pellucidar at the Earth's core. However, John Carter and Carson of Venus never got a chance to meet in the novels. They both did team up with Tarzan in the comics in the 1990s from the Dark Horse Tarzan series. And so here is Tarzan, Carson of Venus, and here is a miniseries where he teams up with John Carter, Warlord of Mars. And I actually really highly recommend all the Dark Horse Tarzan stuff. Most of it's just really fantastic. And these two characters may have actually met in a comic book I don't own. Dynamite did a comic called The Greatest Adventure, which brought together pretty much every Edgar Rice Burroughs hero you can think of in one story. And so it's very possible they met there, but if they did, it would probably have been kind of a big crossover sort of event as opposed to just them teaming up. So I still think them teaming up and, like, you know, just them two being together and interacting is still a very, very special thing. And so that's it. If you're curious about any of the Edgar Rice Burroughs American Mythology comics, I have reviewed them all, so you can just check out my channel for that. And the next one that's going to be coming out, the next new series, is going to be Pellucidar Wings of Death. So that is actually something you can order right now. It's supposed to come out at the end of July. I didn't know about it before I looked on the back of this one shot, so I'm glad I did. So I'm going to shoot my comic shop a message and tell them to reserve me a copy. Or you can always wait until after they come out and order them directly from American Mythology. They actually do a really good job of packing and shipping them, so they will get to you intact. You'll just have to pay a little bit of shipping. Also, if you're curious about the figures that you see, these are, again, from Trendmasters in the 1990s. It's the Tarzan the Epic Adventures line, and I have reviewed all these figures from their Barsoom subline of Tarzan the Epic Adventures, so you can check that out on my channel as well. So like and subscribe for more videos, and until next time, wishing you the best of adventures. See ya.